Join me on an inspiring journey through the world of fitness, health, and performance with the Genetic Coach, where I delve deep into the genetic foundations of athletic endurance, discovering how genetics is revolutionizing our understanding of human potential and how we can unlock our full athletic capabilities through a fresh perspective on conventional practices. A warm welcome to you all again, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to chat with another past Olympian in the form of swimmer Emma Chelius. Known for her prowess in the freestyle sprint events, Emma is a South African record holder and has competed worldwide at many of the sport's prestigious gatherings, the Commonwealth Games, Africa Games, and the World Aquatics Championships, to name a few, with participation at the Tokyo Olympics in 2020 being one of her finest achievements. Emma has very recently hung up her goggles, closing the book on her swimming career, and today she's very kindly offered up some of her time to chat to us about the life of being a competitive swimmer, what drives her, and what she's learned about her body and mind as a top-performing sportswoman. So hello, Emma.
Hi, Diane. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to chat to you today.
Brilliant. So you do know that this is a genetic show, and we like talking about genetics. And that's exactly where I'm going to start off today, the age-old debate of nurture versus nature. So tell us how you found your talent for swimming. Was it something that picked you, or did you grow into becoming a swimmer?
Yeah, so I grew up in KZN, and obviously swimming is such a huge part of our lives down there near the coast. Swimming is a huge sport. It's a huge sport at school. So it was really kind of growing up, loving the water, playing in the pool, spending hours after school at the school pool, doing training, doing water polo. I did try a lot of other sports. My dad was a national rower and my mom was a provincial hockey player. So both quite sporty parents.
The genes.
The genes, I think.
To start off with.
Yeah. But, they obviously could see the benefits of sport in their own lives and really encouraged me and my siblings to try lots of different sports. So, I tried tennis, I tried hockey, netball, but it was very quickly apparent that I was not the greatest on land. So yeah, so I could tell that I maybe had a little bit more talent in the pool than in all the other sports. It didn't stop me from enjoying all the other sports, especially team sports, because swimming, is an individual sport and it can get a little bit lonely. So I really enjoyed the team sports, but definitely in the pool is where I could see I had, better results compared to my peers. That was kind of my sort of yardstick. And then I made my first provincial team at about 11 or 12 years old. And that's when I started training beyond school level with a swimming club.
So, I mean, you obviously felt that you had maybe more of an endurance potential in picking swimming and feeling that that was where your talent and potential lay. Was it difficult for you to train the hours? And I mean, I know that swimmers have to put a huge amount of time into training and they literally live in the pool.
Yeah.
Was it something that you absolutely enjoyed at that young age when you said you did start training seriously? I mean, what did you say, 11 years old?
Yeah. So I think, to be honest, the fact that I did a lot of other sports made it a little bit more bearable. I think if I'd just been doing swimming and it was the only thing I was focusing on day in and day out, I would have struggled. I still, tried lots of other sports. I spent hours. I was involved in school plays. I just kind of got stuck into quite a few things.
Okay.
So swimming was sort of one of many things that I was enjoying. And it was only really in high school and later on in high school that I kind of thought, okay, well, it's almost to avoid injury or kind of just to really focus on trying to maybe qualify for a South African team that I'll need to focus on swimming. But to be very brutally honest, I definitely didn't put in the hours and hours that I probably should have at an age group level. And I kind of got away with talent for quite a few years, I think. And everything has a double edge. So later on, I didn't seem to have that endurance base that many of my peers had built through the hours and hours that they put in. But on the other end, a lot of them got injured or burnt out and
Yeah.
actually didn't progress past high school. So, you know, it could go either ways. Hindsight is always 2020.
Yeah.
I think that growing a love for the sport probably allowed me to have a lot more longevity than if I had really grounded out and maybe got great results as a teenager, but then kind of fizzled out later on.
So interesting. And as you say, completely a double-edged sword. We've spoken to quite of our, other professional athletes that we've had on the show. And it's so interesting how I think, at first you rely pretty much on talent and your natural innate ability, but then there's no getting away from the hard yards, the hard work that one has to put in. And I think eventually, as you progress through the professional ranks, if you're not committed to putting in the hard work, you kind of will get left behind. You can't just rely on talent.
Definitely.
So when did, so you said in your high school sort of stint is when you started really taking it seriously and training seriously. Did you start with a coach, or was it just your swim team that was training you? How did it work?
So I started training with the club, and the coach was actually based at my high school, Nick Gray, and he was well regarded as a great age group coach and helped me a lot with my techniques. He really polished up my freestyle and my butterfly. And he set the goal of winning 4 gold medals at my national age group championships, which is one of the biggest competitions that an age group swimmer can attend in South Africa. And we managed 3 golds.
Wow.
And I think from there, that really set the course for, if you've set a goal, this is how you're going to break it down into steps. You're going to be working at it every day. And that was kind of building that work ethic that you need to be a competitive athlete. And I think that kind of momentum kept building throughout my high school career, and then into some of the hardest work that I put in at a university level. Whereas I think a lot of times, sometimes that pyramid is kind of flipped upside down, and all of the hard work gets done as an age grouper, so that there's almost nothing left to build on when you're in university because you fizzled out.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I think a lot of the coaches that I worked with before I was 18 really pushed me to try and attend more training. They wanted me to come to morning training, and they wanted me to put in a lot more hours. But I think because I was just trying to stay balanced and juggle a lot of other things in high school, I maybe didn't put in the work that I probably needed to as an age grouper to maybe do some of the distance or more endurance-based events. And so I certainly stamped my name on sprinting.
Okay. So that was my next question. What would your typical training look like, and how did you find your niche? Well, you've just said now you didn't have the time to put in for the endurance side. But did you find the sprinting came more naturally to you? Was it easier? I mean, was it something that you just naturally gravitated towards, perhaps, because that's perhaps what your body works best?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the sprinting a lot more. I think I just enjoyed like really going fast and just not having to pace myself or any limitations. Obviously, as an age grouper, you're not as polished as maybe when you get to the higher ranks. But that's also where I was performing better compared to my peers. So the results were coming more in the 50-meter and 100-meter freestyle, 50-meter and 100-meter butterfly, some of the shorter races. You can always ask the question, maybe if I had trained harder, would I have ended up as a middle distance swimmer? Because a lot of coaches commenting on my stroke have said that my arm rate is actually quite low and probably would be more suited for maybe a 200-meter or 400-meter. But I think because I didn't really build that base as an age grouper, it was quite difficult to then convert as you get older and you're maybe a little bit more injury prone and all those other factors come into play. So I stuck to sprinting, and that's just kind of how it all worked out from there.
Okay, so what was a typical training week for you? Did you really work a lot on speed, or was there like a balance of endurance and speed, or how did it work?
So as an age grouper, it was quite a mix. We did sometimes break off into sprint groups versus middle distance or distance because the work was slightly different. But in terms of an aerobic base and building technique, we were pretty much lumped together most of the time. So it depended on the day, which session would be focusing on maybe the speed side and which session was sort of that endurance or aerobic capacity or that kind of thing. As I got into university, I went to the University of Stellenbosch, and there I met a fantastic coach called Karen Hugo. And they didn't actually have a real sprint focus program at the time, but I was really struggling in first year trying to keep up with the medley based or distance based programs. I was kind of still recovering from my shoulder, and I was also in first year, so I was like socializing way too much.
Party.
Yeah, and learning how to live away from home, away from my family, kind of, I was in res, so just trying to manage my own schedule. I didn't have a car, so the Stellenbosch winters hit me like a truck. Trying to cycle to training in the freezing wind and rain. As a Durban girl, that was just terrible. So I was kind of like trying to figure out what was going on. And I had a friend who was there as well, who also was more of a sprint sort of based, and we kind of ganged up a little bit on Karen and asked if we could have a little bit more sprint focused work. And she was phenomenal. She's got her doctorate in sports science, so she really understands the biomechanics and was able to kind of put together a gym and swim program that worked so well for us. So from there, our training schedule looked like 7 to 8 sessions a week in the pool. Sort of, I would say 80% of that would be focusing on speed, at least half of the session. And, in swimming, you can break it up. You can do pull sets, you can do kick sets, you can work the different strokes, you can work your aerobic capacity, anaerobic capacity, you can work your hypoxic, so you can do like limited oxygen work to build your lungs. So there's a lot of ways that she incorporated it. You can add resistance, which was always fun. So we would be pulling sponges through the water, that kind of thing. And then we would be in the gym twice a week as well. Our training load was definitely a little bit lower than the distance guys and the, middle distance guys, but the effort level was very high. So we'd be trying to get very close to our best times in training, which obviously means we need a little bit more recovery.
Yes.
So we would do fewer sessions, but the intensity would be very high.
Okay. So when do you feel you reached your peak? Was it at that university level where maybe your training had changed a little bit more towards a speed focus, and you're doing more in the gym? Is that where you really reached the pinnacle in terms of your results, or when did that come?
Well, objectively, because you can look at time based, which is nice in swimming, you can measure your times. And the fastest I ever swam was in 2021, so leading up to the Tokyo Olympic Games. So I had already graduated and moved away from Stellenbosch, but I was still being coached by Karen quite closely, and that's where we saw the greatest results. So it was actually in that like comeback time after COVID, where it was sort of like, we've got this extra year, we're not sure if Tokyo is going to go ahead or not, but like, let's just give it our all and see how it goes. And we really like put a huge amount of effort to cover all of the bases that we could to try and make it a reality. And then 2021 and 2022 were probably my best seasons. So I would say that's where, I think because I had built that base in university, I was reaping the rewards after COVID, kind of coming back with like this do or die mindset, like we have to make this work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And talking about COVID, I mean, how did you get through the training through that period? Land-based training and having to think out the box in terms of getting your sessions done.
Yeah, so I actually was living in Dubai at the time with my husband. We'd just gotten married in 2019, and I'd come back for Olympic trials in 2020. And that was about 2 weeks before we went into lockdown. Oh. So I came back to Stellenbosch, and there was obviously a lot of talk about COVID and flight restrictions and things. So I was just thinking, okay, I need to get to South Africa so that I don't get stuck, away from Olympic trials. Like in my mind, it was still going to go ahead. And then we went into lockdown and they closed all the flights. So I ended up in South Africa and my husband was in Dubai. And I was at home for about 3 months until I could get a repatriation flight back. And I just tried to do what I could with what I had. So I would gym at home with the weights that we had in the garage. I would tie a bungee cord around my waist, strap it to a tree, and swim in our tiny pool at home until literally my dad was adding buckets of hot water into the pool because we were going into winter, it was going into June.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of athletes can relate that the longest you'll take off in a given season would be about maybe max 2 weeks. And then you get back into that fitness level, like regretting your life. Like, I wish I'd never taken any time off at all because it's such a slog to get back to where you were.
Yeah.
So 3 months was like almost seemed insurmountable mountain to climb. But yeah, I just tried to kind of keep the feel of the water. I know a lot of swimmers were trying to do the same with if they had a pool at home. And then, just gymming and then walking / running, trying to run in that little 6 to 9 a.m. window of freedom that we had, which you basically met the whole neighborhood on your walk.
So crazy to think back on those days. It feels like a lifetime ago. But I mean, so you obviously qualified for the Olympics, and did that come as a shock to you, or were you expecting it? How did that play out?
I think I would say I had faith in myself, but I think you're never really sure until it happens.
Yes.
And initially when I was looking at 2020, I was really hoping for a spot on a relay team. And so that's what we were kind of focusing on. So I was actually training for the 100-meter freestyle.
Okay.
And I think that was a blessing in disguise because the endurance that I had for that event definitely translated to the shorter 50-meter event. But the 50-meter individual race was only on the last day of trials. So, it was really like all or nothing. And we were in this COVID bubble. So the pressure was kind of mounting day by day. It was thinking it was really quite something. We did a time trial on about the second or third day for that relay in 2021. And we actually got the time that we had been told we needed to go for the relay. So that took a huge amount of pressure off because we had basically been told, okay, you 4 girls, you've got your spots.
Okay.
But it was very important for me to give it my best shot in the 50-meter because I really wanted to swim an individual race. Seeing that I'd been able to swim that time in the 100-meter then gave me a bit of confidence for that last day, the final opportunity to qualify. So I wouldn't say I was like going in guns blazing, definitely going to qualify. But I think I was quietly confident in the work that we had done. And I just had faith that what God was planning was going to happen. So that was my mindset going in.
So let's talk about that Olympic experience. I mean, it must have been quite strange in the world that we were living in at that stage, and the precautions and everything that had to be taken. Did it meet your expectations in terms of what you thought the Olympics was going to be? Was it greater than your expectations? And how did that play out?
I think because I knew it was going to be a COVID Olympics, I didn't really have expectations. I was quite disappointed that there were no spectators. But in a way, looking back, it was also very special to know that your teammates were there to cheer you on, and that like really made an impact. And I love, cheering on my teammates. That's like one of the highlights for me of going to an international competition. So that I took that role very seriously. Because there was no crowd. So your teammates became your only cheerleaders. It was an completely empty stadium. So that was something that we had to navigate. And then obviously all the precautions and the stress, I think also leading up to when we left, it became very difficult to navigate social situations. It almost felt like our entire families had to kind of go into this bubble with us because if they socialized, it ended up putting us at risk. It was quite tense. So I think in terms of the sort of build up, I know any Olympics you're going to be feeling that pressure and feeling that kind of tense energy leading up to it. But I think COVID magnified that tenfold. In terms of experiences, I had the most amazing time. I really, really tried to soak up every moment. I think being in the athletes' village is something I will remember for the rest of my life. Just seeing all the different sporting codes, all the different body types, and knowing that they're all, the best in the world at what they do was just something extraordinary. It was so amazing. And then I was very fortunate that my race went well. So that was just the cherry on top of an amazing experience. But yeah, definitely different to, growing up thinking about the Olympics is completely different.
Yeah. So how do you as an athlete, you're talking about the stress, and obviously the COVID pandemic just elevated that stress component going to an event like the Olympics. But, throughout your career, you had to mentally stay strong for, I guess, everything that you faced, never mind just getting into the pool every day and doing your training. What helped you stay mentally strong throughout your career, and what did you learn about yourself in terms of your mental resilience?
I think one of the hardest components of the build-up was that a lot of the sessions I trained by myself. So once I left Stellenbosch and moved to Dubai, the squad that I had in Stellies was absolutely incredible. I loved training with them every day. They were also student athletes, so we would, socialize together as well. We were just great friends. And I really missed that when I left and went to Dubai. I had an age group squad who were amazing, but they were all a lot younger than I was. So I trained with sort of teenage boys. Or I trained alone. So with Karen. So that was quite difficult, but I do think it definitely built mental resilience. Like I can zone in, do the work. I don't need people around me to tell me I can do it. Like I need to be able to have the mental talk and the mental resilience to get myself through the session. And that's something you can practice. It is a skill. It was really, really difficult at first, but I found over the months and months that I did it, I learned how to dig deep and how to actually talk to myself to get the results that I wanted in training. I did also work with a great sports psychologist, so that helped hugely. And he equipped me with a lot of tools that I needed, especially with the stress of COVID. We also had the riots in Durban in 2021. That was the week that we left. So the supermarkets were closed. We were making arrangements to have a police escort to the airport because the roads were closed. So it was just like a pressure cooker, really. And by the time I got to Tokyo, I think I had been coping with all that stress, that once I arrived, it was almost like a relief. Like, okay, I'm here. Like I made it here through all of these hurdles. Like, let's go. Like I'm ready. I'm ready to go. So, I think as an athlete, you do build that resilience. I think self-talk is huge. I don't think I could have gotten through if I hadn't been able to almost coach myself through some of the sessions. My husband is also an Olympian. So, being able to lean on him and also use his knowledge was also amazing. So the people around me and then my own sort of self-talk and the tools were the tools that kind of got me through. So by the time I got to the race, I'd done all the work. I'd worked with a sports psychologist. I'd also done a lot of visualization, which my coach really encouraged me to do. So that by the time I got to the race, it felt like I'd swum it a million times before. And it was such an awesome feeling to know, like, you couldn't have done anything more to be ready for this.
Yeah. And I guess you just had such a greater hunger for what you were about to do because of all the obstacles that you had to jump over to get there. And I often find that in athletes, that the greater the obstacles in their pathway, often the better they do and succeed. It's just
it feels like a reward.
Yeah.
Like I get to do this because I fought so hard for it.
Yeah.
So it's great.
So just to circle back to your training, and you spoke about the fact that because you were doing such high intensity workouts, you had to really focus on your recovery. What are the parts of your training, your nutrition, your recovery, etc., that you just work for you? Obviously, through a little bit of trial and error, in your years of doing the sport, you figured these things out. But what are those things that you just know, this is what I need to do if I'm going to succeed?
I really enjoy sports massage. So that helps me. That's like one of the foundational things weekly that I would do to try and get my body ready and recovered for the next sessions. Nutrition was also, like you said, such a key role, but not just sort of like, not only out of the pool, but also in the pool. I found that I had very little knowledge of what my body actually needed during a training session to kind of kick into that next gear. And once I kind of unlocked that, I found like a whole new level of energy that I needed during training. So, focusing on like the carb intake during a session, and then the protein intake after a session to recover. That was so huge. That was like this awakening for me, which I think is true for a lot of athletes, because we don't always have the education around that. A lot of times we just kind of running on fumes during training sessions, and there's actually so many things out there that we could use to benefit. So definitely nutrition in the pool or during a session helped a lot, as well as outside of the pool. And then I also used oxygen therapy, which was something new that I added in 2021. So leading up to Olympic trials, I think end of 2020 actually, I went into an oxygen chamber sometimes twice a week for an hour. And that really, I felt a difference from that. It really boosted, my recovery, and I felt like I could sleep better. So it's something that you don't really notice until it's suddenly not in your routine. And then you think, oh, okay, something's missing now. So that was really beneficial for me. And then I would use a foam roller. I would make sure to do a really good warm up. Especially as you're getting older, you take a little bit longer to warm up. So I would try and do some pre-pool kind of mobility stuff, and try and make sure that once I'm into the pool for my pool warm up, it's kind of like we can move things along a little quicker. I think I also had a massage gun. So it's just things that like kind of help loosen up your muscles and get you ready for the next session. Because obviously we would also sometimes do 2 sessions, sometimes 2 swims and a gym per day. So, the time in between is quite short. So you have to really make the most of the exercise or the recovery options that you have.
Yeah. But, I guess it comes down to how consistently you're employing those recovery strategies, right? So it doesn't help just to have a massage every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe, and maybe eat a bit of protein, maybe every and that type of thing. And I think, was it your coach who sort of put you on that road, who educated you around these things, or did you kind of figure these things out for yourself?
So definitely, Karen was great with encouraging us to make use of all the recovery methods. When I was at the University of Stellenbosch, I was also on a high performance program. And so we had a budget that was built around training and recovery. And so that kind of also really paved the way for me to make use of the facilities that they had, fortunately at no cost to me. Once I left, it was then obviously all up to me to cover those things. And I think that can put a lot of people off, because you're like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need to spend on a massage this week. Oh, I'm fine. I'm not, until you're not fine.
Yeah.
And you always need to be keeping up with that stuff before you need it. You have to be employing those things before it becomes a necessity.
Preemptive.
But they are expensive. So something like massage weekly is not always accessible. I was fortunate that was kind of a foundation or a standard that was built from when I was at university. And then I just really tried my best to keep it up.
Well, I think you're going to really enjoy having your genetic test results given to you, because these are the kind of things that we delve into and we uncover the type of information in terms of what type of recovery strategy should you be employing for your unique genetics. And like you say, there's so many things out there that could potentially work, but they all have a cost associated. Well, many of them do have a cost associated with it. And there's a time component, time to actually put it all into action. The genetic testing really just refines that information and says, right, for you, these are the 3 strategies you need to focus on. And
I'm very curious about the ice bath. Ice bath. component, because I think I've just made it up in my own head that that doesn't really work for me.
I'm exactly the same. I said, nope, that's not going to be on my radar.
Yeah, knowing my luck, it's going to come up as the number one recovery strategy that I should be doing. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Essentially, that's, genetic testing opens this whole new world of really redefining what you're doing, not only in your recovery, but in your nutrition and in your training, and how it can really direct your practices to shorten that sort of trial and error component of
Yeah.
athletes, no matter what your level. So we've spoken a little bit about recovery. What about injury? You did mention a little bit of a shoulder niggle that you were dealing with. Is that the only thing that you've experienced during your career, or have there been others?
No, I really wish it was. I have struggled quite a lot with injury. Well, with one specific injury. I wouldn't say that I'm injury prone, but I did suffer quite a bad injury to my right elbow, and it actually happened at the Olympics.
Oh,
of all
goodness.
places. So
Yeah.
it happened about 3 or 4 days before the competition started. And I'm not sure if it was after, travel fatigue, or, your body has gone into taper. So your joints are a little bit, everything's kind of figuring what is going on, because you were at such a hectic training load and now you've completely decompressed. But as I was diving off of the block at the Olympic pool, I don't know what happened, but I'm still, to this day, not quite sure. But I managed to injure a tendon in my elbow. I just kind of strapped it up at the Olympics and just went for physio every day and just was like, we're not dealing with this now. Like, I cannot deal with this right now.
Wow.
And then when I got back, I took quite a long time off, and it was in the back of my mind, but I didn't really feel it other than when I was in the pool. So I didn't really notice it. And then I got back into the pool about a month later, and it was still really, really painful. So since then, it's just been niggling on and off, and it's been about 3 years. I've had multiple MRIs, I've been to physios, I've been to bios, I've been to doctors, I've been on medication, I've taken time off, I've skipped competitions, and it's just been an ongoing issue. So yeah, I can completely come from a perspective of being an injured athlete. It's really no fun. I'm still not quite sure what happened, but it basically is the tendon that inserts to your bicep and your tricep. So it kind of gets in the way all the time. And it is unfortunate, because after that, I really stopped. Well, I didn't compete in butterfly for a really long time, because it puts quite a lot of additional pressure on. And I just really wanted to still be able to at least swim freestyle.
Yes.
Yeah. And even with all of those recovery things, sometimes these things come along and you just can't avoid them. So yeah, it's tough.
Wow. So you swam at the Olympics with a sore elbow.
Yes. I had to take the strapping off. We're not allowed to race with strapping.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I think the adrenaline just carried me through. I think I was in very fit racing conditions. So, even with that setback, I still managed to do a best time, and I didn't feel it at all. So I think it was just the adrenaline that got me through.
Cool. So I wanted to ask you about the current science and technology that we have, well, in most professional sports nowadays, but particularly for swimming, as you are a swimmer. And we're just seeing records being broken and faster times. And tell us a little bit about the science and technology in swimming and how our top swimmers are leveraging that currently.
Well, I think there's still a lot that we can be doing. I think, to be honest, South Africa is quite behind in terms of science and tech. I mean, we see the Australians and the Brits and the Canadians at international competitions, the Chinese especially. It's really fascinating what they are doing. I know a lot of the elite athletes use a lot of heart rate technology. So they'll strap a heart rate monitor on, or they'll swim with a watch, and they'll be able to track which zone they are training in. So that's, I think, hugely beneficial. And also good to be able to kind of keep up with the recovery. You know, how am I doing today? Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of that, because if I was wearing a smartwatch or tracking it and it told me my readiness score or whatever wasn't great, I would feel like, okay, now what do I do? You know, so in a way, I almost wanted to be able to kind of follow my own body and what it was telling me. So I didn't really wear a smartwatch, but I know that a lot of the top Olympians in South Africa have been tracking their heart rates, and I think it's working really well. And then we also, you know, I think we are quite far behind in terms of race analysis and technique analysis. So a lot of the international federations send a whole team to these international meets that actually record all of the swimmers, and then they have a tablet, they have instant feedback, and they can see, okay, your stroke rate dropped here, or, you know, this happened on your dive and this happened on your turn, and they have immediate feedback on what they need to improve on. So that kind of video analysis, you know, we can do it in training with smartphones or just like recording ourselves. But I think that we don't make use of that nearly enough in South Africa. There's a coach in Pretoria, Mark Randall, who's got one of these EO handsets, which is quite a new technology. It kind of like fits into the palm of your hand like a paddle, and it's Bluetooth enabled, and it can track your stroke rate and your stroke cycle almost down to kind of the millimeter. Like if your hand is pulling outwards, it will track you. If your one stroke cycle on the left is shorter than your stroke, you know, reach on the right, it will tell you. So that's technology that's really exciting, that's now arrived in South Africa and is available for swimmers to book. But, you know, because we're in the water, we are kind of limited with how much we can kind of strap on ourselves and like track everything. And also the visibility of the coaches is also a little bit limited. So it is quite difficult to make those minor tweaks. I do think we could be doing more, but I also think that in South Africa, our high performance coaches are almost overburdened with other things. So, you know, they're also running junior squads, they're running high performance squads, they've got loads of kids in the water at the same time. It's really difficult for them to find the time to actually go into, you know, the finer details of it with all the technology that they have available, and the energy actually at the end of the day, because they expend so much energy. Another thing that I think worked really well for me, and I'm not sure if there are many other athletes or female athletes out there doing it, but I think we are also a little bit behind with this, is tracking our cycles, our menstrual cycles. So because, you know, fortunately I worked with a female coach, and we had an app that we used where she would be able to access the information that I was logging, and I could log my symptoms, you know, my premenstrual symptoms when I was actually on my period. And that almost then she was able to use that data to influence how I was training. And actually that ties into recovery, because on the weeks where I was not at my best, she was able to then schedule that as a recovery week. And then the days, you know, where my hormones were like, all the green lights were there, we could really push in the sessions. So, and I don't think it's spoken about enough, you know, like that is such a huge part of a female athlete, that we can't push week in and week out at the same intensity. So once you actually harness that and leverage it, you unlock like your best training weeks ever, I've found, with cycle syncing. So that technology is there, it's easily accessible, it's just on an app. But I think it's the education and the knowledge, and then also the time with these big squads. How do you then manage that? Because not everybody's, you know, on the same week at the same time. So it's tricky.
It is tricky, completely. You know, as a coach myself, that definitely is something that I employ with my female athletes, and it makes a world of difference. And it's just, you know, it really comes down to the individual, you know, the individual athlete and what they respond to and where they are, you know, as you say, in the particular cycle and how their body responds, because also not every female responds the same in a certain part of their cycle. So getting to know the individual and what their different needs are. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you bring that up, because it definitely is a topic that needs more light shone on it.
Yeah.
For sure. But you talk about your recovery, and I mean, do you go more with how the body feels when you look at, am I ready for my next hard session? Because a lot of athletes are using, the aura rings and the whoops and the whatnots to, like you say, give you a readiness score for your next session and where you're lying. But I think there's a lot to be said for perceived feel and perceived fatigue,
and
and
I think
how the body is feeling.
Sometimes we almost have too much data. It's almost too much to track and too much to, and it ends up kind of getting in the way of like, okay, but you need to do the work. So how are you going to get around that? So obviously it's a good prompt. Okay, listen, you need to like be more mindful of your recovery, and you need to maybe spend a bit of extra time really focusing on it this week. But at the end of the day, you also need to be able to, like really remind yourself that you need to be able to do the work and recover at a high level. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan. I did try it. I did use it for a little while, like basically that gives me a readiness score each day and kind of tracks my HRV and all of that kind of thing. But I just found that it was kind of like getting in the way for me. And it was also making me doubt how I felt about my own body, because sometimes I would wake up feeling like, oh, okay, cool, I'm feeling good. And then my readiness score, and it would be like 50%, like you need to take the day off. And I would be thinking, okay, but am I wrong or are you wrong? Because one of us is not matching up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of athletes do use it, but I've found that I prefer just listening to my own body and kind of like making decisions from there.
So, I mean, you have now retired, and your career has come to an end. What is next on the horizon for you? And will swimming still be part of the picture for you?
Yes, well, definitely. I really hope to be involved with swimming for the next little while. My husband is a swimming coach, so he will still be at all the major galas with his great swimmers. And yeah, swimming has been such a huge part of my life and such a passion, that I really want to, now that I have the time, still be involved in giving back to swimming. So I'm actually working with super sports schools from next year. So I'll be attending most of the major school swimming galas around South Africa, which I'm very excited about. And commentating and interacting with some of the sort of next generation of swimmers. I'm hoping that we'll have more media coverage of swimming, because it does tend to be underrepresented in sort of the mainstream media. Even though, we bring home Olympic medals in swimming, it's not really something that you see besides maybe once or twice a year in these major competitions. So it would just be so nice for people to find swimmers more familiar and kind of get to know them a little bit better, follow their journeys, get excited about them, so that when they do pop up at these international meets, you know who you're cheering for, and you feel like you've got a bit of a connection. So I would really love to see a little bit more of that, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to work with Swimming South Africa to kind of increase the exposure for swimming. But yeah, I'm definitely still excited to be involved in swimming, with swimming clinics and talking at schools. And yeah, I really love the sport. So I'm excited to be on pool deck for now. Still
Wonderful.
at the pool, but on the pool deck.
Wonderful. And I think it's wonderful that you can give back to the sport that has given you so much. And particularly, helping our youth, because I think the lessons learned in the years that you've been part of the sport, you can definitely pass those on to the ones that are coming after you. And that makes a world of difference when you've got experience like that you can pass on. So thank you for joining us today, and we wish you all the best in what lies ahead. I know it can't be easy transitioning from, full-time professional swimmer to, something complete. Well, it's not completely different, but definitely a different side of the pool.
A shift in routine and priorities and all of that. So Yeah, but I'm getting the hang of it slowly.
Good, good. Well, we wish you all the best, and we will be following you. And we do hope to see more of our swimmers in the media and getting them more exposure, and obviously seeing more of them in, the world class performances on the world stage. So yeah. We'll
Thank you
keep
so
an
much,
eye on you.
and yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about swimming because I really love it, and I'm excited to get my results back and hopefully not see an ice bath on there.
We'll have to check in with you once your results come out, and you'll have to divulge some information.
Good.
Yeah, thanks again, Emma, and we'll hopefully chat to you soon.
Thanks so much for having me.